But we're going to begin with the intensifying attacks in the Middle East. U.S. Central Command says it's completed a heavy wave of strikes against Iran, and Tehran is now retaliating. Jordan says it intercepted 5 missiles from Iran overnight. Now, yesterday, President Trump vowed to fight back after the U.S. thwarted a surprise Iranian attack on U.S. forces.
We're going to be hitting them very hard because it's our turn to hit them. They know it's coming. They're asking us not to do it, but, they tried shooting it last night.
CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now. So, Weijia, we heard the president warn about these attacks before they took place. What's the goal here, and what's the latest on these negotiations?
Well, the goal is to show that he means it when he says that he will always hit back. And you're right, he did telegraph that this attack was coming because he said, it would not be acceptable to allow Iran to try to carry out this surprise attack on U.S. forces. And in terms of how it's impacting, talks and the longer range plan, this has sort of been the president's SOP since the war began, using threats and carrying out attacks for retaliation while also keeping the door open to potential negotiations. And that's exactly what has happened here. He continues to say that his team is talking to Iran, both indirectly and directly, even though Iran disputes that. So I think that, the president continues to say that he will always hit back Iran when the U.S. is threatened. I think that, the question is how far he is willing to go. But because some of these threats have been more fiery than others. But certainly he made good on his word when he signaled this was coming.
And Weijia, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in an interview that it's President Trump's decision on how to proceed with Iran. But Netanyahu hasn't always seen eye to eye with the administration. So where do things stand?
This public deference makes sense because Israel needs the U.S. in this fight, and there were mounting tensions between the two leaders, and perhaps even there still were behind closed doors. But publicly, both of them came out of that meeting praising each other, talking about how aligned they are. But there is reporting that we are working to confirm that privately, you're absolutely right. They still don't see eye to eye about how this ends, because Netanyahu is extremely skeptical that any kind of long-term peace deal can be reached. And that, of course, is what the president hopes to do out of all of this. And so, they will continue to talk, obviously, but there is some difference in how to finish off this conflict, when that might be, what it will take. And ultimately, of course, that is a big difference that will matter to everyone in the region and here in the U.S.
All right, Weijia, appreciate it.
All right, joining us now to discuss the situation in the Middle East is CBS News contributor Elliot Ackerman. He's a former CIA officer and a Marine Corps veteran. Good to see you. So the conflict appears to be expanding, but more importantly, I know that there's discussion happening around the other countries that are sort of being drawn into this. I see that our European allies don't want any part of this at all. And primarily, and this is the question for you, Elliot, is because there doesn't seem to be an end goal. There doesn't seem to be the president, the defense secretary, has not articulated to the American people why we are doing this, other than we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, which was the point of the JPC. I don't want to get back. I don't want to get into what had been done before, but the notion that Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon seems to be the only thing that the president is signaling to the American people. And there are ways to do that without putting blood and treasure at risk.
Yeah, and I think, listen, the more this war expands, the more countries it's being fought, and it becomes more and more of a quagmire, and it becomes more and more difficult to see how there can be a single strategic solution to this. So the Europeans' reluctance, I think, manifests that, and I think, we're seeing the Trump administration kind of trying to muddle through to some type of a strategy that could lead to the war's conclusion, but so far it hasn't been clearly articulated.
So let's talk a little bit about this expanding conflict, right? I mean, I'm thinking about all of these countries that are getting involved. I immediately think of oil. I think of the folks at home who are looking at this war and they're saying, I'm frustrated. I don't love this. We're going into the midterms. I think about something that we talked, all three of us last week, I believe, about the fact that our weaponry, our arsenal of weapons could be running out or getting low. What is your reaction to the fact that we are now seeing more countries get involved with all of those things that I just mentioned?
I think obviously it puts us in a weaker strategic position, the fact that we are dipping into our strategic munition reserves. But I think what we're also seeing with the expansion of the conflict is, that is and has been the Iranian strategy. We've seen there have been, Saudi attacks on militias in Iran. These are Shiite militias. That takes us back to sort of the Iraq war and the tension that exists inside of Iraq between Sunni and Shia. What does the region look like if you have a re-destabilized Iraq, and how does that affect U.S. interest? And that destabilization is all part of an Iranian strategy to escalate the war by spreading the war.
The other question, of course, is what kind of military objectives, given that we don't seem to have any, but if we did have them, what kind of military objectives can be reached by bombing a country into submission? Has any war ever been won by simply a bombing campaign, as great as it is, as powerful as our Air Force and our naval aviators and Marine Corps aviators are? Is that a way to actually win a war?
No, and again, these are tools. The military, is a tool in our foreign policy. But just like if you're building a house, you can't just build a house with a hammer. You got to have an architectural blueprint of how you're going to build this house. And I think the challenge right now is, that blueprint doesn't seem to be coming together, even though we have many of the finest tools of any country on the planet.
All right, Elliot. Sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
No, I was just going to say, it feels like things are spiraling out of control a little bit. Things are getting bigger and bigger. What's your assessment of who's winning right now?
It's tough to, who's winning. I think you can see the two strategies. Mm-hmm. And, I think getting the war to spiral out of control is absolutely in Iran's interests, and having it spread is in their interests. And we're seeing them enact that strategy right now.
Mm-hmm. All right, Elliot Ackerman, thank you very much as always, my friend.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.